everyone, and welcome to Texas A&M's Earth Month celebration for 2022. Happy Earth Month, April. We're really excited for all of you to join us. We're definitely excited to kick off this month's festivities with this talk here about carbon capturing by Eric Emig and Kayla Sidik. So definitely going to be getting to that very shortly. Looking forward to hearing what these two amazing students have to teach us today. Before that, I just want to let you know some of the logistics of our Earth Month that we have here this month. And remember this phrase here, together we can save ourselves. That's going to kind of be the theme of all of our talks this month. So first things first is that you should watch this in side-by-side mode. That way you can see the screen and the presenters clearly. We've also have enabled live transcripts. So if you wanted to watch with the transcript happening, you have that option. Also, please ask some questions in the chat. At the conclusion of this talk, we'll have a chance to ask our presenters a few questions about their topics. And it's just much more lively if you ask questions rather than me. And also, this is recording, so just be aware of that. This is being recorded, and it will be available afterwards on YouTube as well. And you may also be here because you've heard about some really amazing prizes. You've probably seen it on Instagram, on our email to campus. And this is the way that prizes work. So you have to collect code words while you watch these virtual talks. And each code word equals one entry into our random draw giveaway. And the code words will be written on a PowerPoint slide. They will be spoken by the presenters, or they will be written in the chat by me. And you need to keep track of your code words. You're in charge of that. And then you submit them all in one email to sustainability@tamu.edu. And you have all the way until April 27th to collect all those code words. And the reason being is that you can also watch this recorded. But when you watch it live, like you are here today, make sure to get your your pencils out, because you're going to get 5 code words today. So you can actually get 5 points, 5 entries into the giveaway. And then when you watch the recording, you only actually get 1 entry. So much more beneficial to watch live. And you can even double up. You can earn points through Maroon Base. That's the app that the campus has. And it actually gives you cash prizes. You can earn up to $2,000 in Maroon Base. So check that out. Make sure you log into that event through Maroon Base as well. And if you want more of the details, all of the rules, all of the prizes, all of that good stuff, go to our website. You can see it right on the landing page. This is a direct link right there. And then what are the prizes? I'm sure you might be motivated for those. This one is really exciting. This first tier 1, we get 1 winner for this. Is kind of like a grand prize. You actually get to choose between a bunch of different options. And this first one is a Ronin full moon dinner for 2. So you actually get to eat dinner in the full moonlight at the Ronin farm to table, their actual farm. It's a local restaurant here in Bryan College Station. And let me tell you, they definitely have some of the absolute best food in the Brazos Valley. It's delicious. It might, it's kind of expensive because it tastes so good. And that's why we're giving this away. Dinner for 2, full moon dinner. You can also win a Yeti cooler if you prefer that. Take on your next adventure. You could also win a GoPro Hero 7 if you want to just film yourself doing cool stuff outside. And then you could also choose between wireless headphones. And you can also get a sports pass or a rec group exercise pass. Those are for faculty and staff, a full year. So those are your options for tier 1. There's a bunch of options for tier 2. You could win a whole year for a Vail Ride bike. You could win a hammock. You can win a skincare bundle, and you can see the rest of the prizes there. And there's actually two winners for tier 2. And then tier 3, there's going to be 5 winners and lots of cool things here. Microgreen growing kit is one of my favorite options out of this list. And then just for participating, if you just keep track of some code words, everyone can win. You can win a water bottle or office water bottle with 2 code words, a t-shirt with 3. And if you get all 5 code words, you can actually get both. And those are while supplies last. So that's everything we have for us today. And with that, Erica and Kayla are going to take it away, so you can teach us about carbon capturing whenever y'all ladies are ready. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So welcome to our Earth Month celebration talk. We'll be talking about carbon capturing in cities. My name is Erica. I'm an environmental studies major, class of 24.
I'm Kayla Sidik. I'm an environmental design major, class of 2025.
Okay, so to just give you a brief overview, we're going to be talking about what is the carbon cycle, and then also carbon sequestration. We'll talk a bit about that, and then kind of applying that into urban settings to talk about carbon capturing in cities, and then we'll have a Q&A portion. So first, we're going to talk about the carbon cycle. We hear about the water cycle and other natural cycles that occur on Earth, but the carbon cycle is just as important. And so here's just a little graphic that shows you, I'm gonna move this. So we're going to start by looking at these carbonate rocks down in the bottom. And so carbon is stored in carbonate rocks in layers underground. And so very high levels of carbon is stored. 75 million gigatons is stored in these carbonate rocks. And so problems occur when there is an excess of CO2 in the atmosphere. And this is due to the human activity of drilling into these deep underground carbon reserves and the carbonate rocks and burning that carbon for fuel. So as you can see in the atmosphere here, there's a big cloud of CO2, and that's when the problem occurs. So from there, through human activity, it's released into the atmosphere. And this is mentioned a lot in this day and age because of the excess of CO2 in the atmosphere. So having carbon dioxide in the atmosphere isn't necessarily or inherently a bad thing. It's all part of the natural carbon cycle. But the reason why we hear about it so much is because there's an excess of it. And since CO2 is a greenhouse gas, this creates the greenhouse gas effect. And we hear about that with climate change and warming of the planet. So however, even though there is an excess of CO2 in the atmosphere through human activity, we can see that atmospheric carbon can be captured out of the atmosphere and stored and sequestered into, we have oceans and lakes over here, and we also have vegetation and soil. So all these things can capture carbon and sequester it underground or in water. And so first of all, lakes and oceans over here store a large amount of carbon at 40,000 gigatons. But for this talk, we're going to be focusing on how vegetation and soil can sequester carbon. And it happens in a stable way. So it's not going to be released back into the atmosphere as readily as maybe like burning carbon through fossil fuels. So carbon storing in a stable way provides many benefits other than just mitigating climate change. And by using these principles and by understanding the carbon cycle, we can work towards reducing climate change by increasing the vegetation and soil that that is capturing carbon. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
We're just going to talk about carbon sequestration and more about that and what it is. So Kayla, go ahead.
Okay, so what exactly is carbon sequestration? It is a process of capturing and storing atmospheric carbon dioxide. And so the different types of carbon sequestration include geological, biological, and technological sequestration. Today's focus will be biological carbon sequestration, which zones in on vegetation. And so some of the biological carbon sequestration that commonly comes to mind are forests, grasslands, and cup forests. And so biological sequestration focus to sequester carbon into the soil and into the roots of plants, which creates a healthier soil environment that increases nutrient levels, promotes less erosion and compaction of soil, and improves soil structure. Another benefit from biological carbon sequestration is reduction in carbon footprint. Because vegetation, especially the use of native plants, pull carbon into the ground through its roots and thus help to lessen the carbon in the area for the greenhouse gas effect. And so the areas with more vegetation not only improve the health of the soil and lessen the carbon in the area, but it also provides for cool temperatures because there's less impermeable surfaces, and more vegetation create more space for pore surfaces.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the different types of carbon sequestration, so geological, biological, and technological. So it's interesting to compare these because, first of all, geological carbon sequestration is kind of thinking back to that carbon cycle. So since carbon is taken out of these carbonate rocks, basically geological carbon sequestration would mean putting them back into those reserves underground. And so Kayla talked about biological sequestration, which that's going to be the focus of our talk, but it's interesting to think about technological sequestration. So technological sequestration can take various forms. One of the forms that's very prevalent today is direct air capture. And so these are, great inventions that have promise, but also they're very costly. And it's kind of important to note that vegetation, how we're talking about vegetation and soils capturing carbon, these, quote unquote technologies of biological carbon sequestration have been evolving for millions of years to do exactly what we're kind of trying to develop now. And so it's kind of interesting that a very old solution is right in front of us, and we're still trying to, develop these costly solutions when there's a perfectly good solution, which is just, increasing vegetation and the capacity for soil to sequester carbon.
So ways we typically think about carbon sequestration. So some typical images that come to mind when we think of carbon sequestration are dense forests, wide grasslands, and kelp forests or oceans. So these are carbon sinks, and the largest carbon sink in the world are actually our forests and our oceans. However, because our population is rapidly growing and our global carbon impact is rapidly increasing, more and more resources are being demanded on a global scale. And so this affects our forests, which is some of the world's biggest carbon sinks. Forests cover around 30% of the world's surface area. However, because more and more timber is being demanded for housing and development, or for land to farm for food, such as livestock, it's disappearing at an alarming rate. So about 17% of the Amazonian rainforest has been destroyed over the past 50 years. And that's because more and more resources have been demanded in the last 50 years than ever. So here's a statistic. According to the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, 68% of the world's population is projected to live in urban areas by 2050, which raises the question, how is the world going to sequester carbon with the rate of development and demand in resources it's at? So this is the time we need to consider carbon sequestration in cities and communities.
So taking these principles of carbon sequestration and applying them to cities, we can think about how we can sequester carbon in urban settings. So there's a lot of different ways that carbon sequestration can happen, even in urban settings, so such as urban gardens, green roofs, forests, parks, and even wetlands. So these are all examples of how cities can host a range of biological carbon capturing tools. So for urban gardens, a lot of benefits can come out of urban gardens, such as increased food security and also obviously capturing carbon. And so increased food security is really an important aspect, especially in cities with food deserts and very dependent supply chains on these big grocers. It's important to also have some urban gardens. So green roofs are really cool in my opinion. They capture carbon and also they reduce the urban heat island effect, which I'll explain later on. And wetlands are also really important. They can host a big range of biodiverse plant and animal species, as well as capturing carbon, and they contribute to large amounts of biomass. They also have the capability to mitigate flooding in cities, which is really important if you think about how hurricanes are becoming more frequent and more severe with climate change. Flooding is a huge problem in cities, especially if they don't have the updated infrastructure. And wetlands are also able to control stormwater runoff really well. And so urban forests are also really important. They can sequester a huge amount of carbon. In fact, the total carbon stored in US urban forests is 643 million metric tons. And the total carbon stored in US urban soils is 1.9 billion metric tons. So together, this amount of carbon stored is equivalent to offsetting 1,049,210,457,222 gallons of gasoline consumed. So that's a huge amount of carbon that we're able to sequester in urban forests and urban soils. And so urban gardens is also really important. A study from Penn State shows that just with less than 0.1% of land covered with landscape gardens, the amount of carbon stored in the ground was still notable at 81.99 metric tons. And this is equivalent to 33,828 gallons of gasoline consumed. So that's how much that's offsetting. So even though there's much less carbon stored with the gardens than with the forests, there are other benefits to the city and its inhabitants with these urban gardens. And so also, if you think about if such a small percentage of land cover can host so many benefits, just imagine how much carbon could be sequestered with the implementation of more of these carbon capturing land cover types, such as urban gardens. And so that's a really important thing to think about when we're trying to improve our cities and make them greener. So here are just some innovative examples of cities taking initiative all around the world and implementing these practices into their cities. So we'll look at Copenhagen, Boulder, Chicago, and Austin. So first we're going to look at Copenhagen, Denmark. So here's a picture of one of their green roofs. Copenhagen is one of the most sustainable cities in the world and also has plans to be carbon neutral. So this here is an example of a green roof, which not only captures carbon out of the atmosphere, but also has many other benefits, such as reducing the urban heat island effect. So the urban heat island effect is a phenomenon that describes how cities are hotter than other areas with more vegetation. And this is because of how the sun reflects off different surfaces, such as if you think about cement and other non-porous surfaces that are typically found in like traditional cities, these reflect more sunlight and make the microclimate in the city much hotter than if there were vegetation to absorb some of that heat and some of that sunlight. So looking back at this picture of Copenhagen, this city is unique because there's actually legislation that mandates green roofs to be put in on all new construction that meets the criteria for having a green roof. So that's something that we definitely want all cities to strive for, and for them to look at Copenhagen as an example for the rest of the world as a green city. So here's a picture of Boulder, Colorado. So you might not necessarily think it looks, as pretty as Copenhagen. It's not as bright green, but an important thing to notice about these two different cities is just like the climate and how Colorado is more semi-arid and has more semi-arid soils. So this is going to determine kind of what plants are going to thrive here best, and also which plants are native and which are invasive. So while a lot of cities might want to choose vegetation that looks really nice and bright green and is more, aesthetic looking, it's still important to choose vegetation that's also native to the area. So it can still look really nice, but also have a lot of carbon capturing power and like thrive in that area the best. So here's a picture of Chicago, Illinois. It's kind of the same idea. We have some urban forests, bodies of water also sequester a lot of carbon. And it overall just looks like a nice, in my opinion, it looks very beautiful. So this is kind of like an example for all cities that can look like this. Here's a picture of Austin, Texas. So again, same idea. Here's an urban park. A lot of people can enjoy this park and just be happier residents of the city, and also at the same time sequestering a lot of carbon.
So the benefits of carbon sequestration. Well, there are three main aspects to look at, which include environment, social, and economic. The first one is environmental. Can we go to the next slide?
Sorry, I went too far.
You're good. So bringing carbon sequestration into cities mitigates atmospheric carbon dioxide, which reduces the urban heat island effect. And it also improves air quality. How many of y'all have been hiking at a national park and noticed a difference in air quality? Vegetation makes a huge difference in the air quality and quality of life. And that's where carbon sequestration in communities also makes a positive impact in people's day-to-day lives. Bringing in more greenery in communities also generally increases walkability of a neighborhood. So this is where the benefits of carbon sequestration affect the social aspect of a community. So the next slide, so bringing in more greenery in communities helps to get people moving and interacting outside, and it brings nature into cities and helps improve mental health issues such as anxiety and depression, which are the most common mental health issues that affect urban communities. Another positive outcome is learning and growing urban gardens, where neighborhoods can have the opportunity to grow their own nutrient-rich food. And many residents who live in apartment buildings who don't have access to backyards to garden their own food have the opportunity to garden because of community gardens. And the last one is economic. So vegetation and greenery reduces the cost of heating and cooling buildings, and this also promotes green infrastructure and greener communities, which also increase real estate property value. Another thing that vegetation helps with is roundabouts. So roundabouts, instead of traffic lights, help to reduce the cost of energy, and it also helps to promote more native plants in the area. And so the next slide shows the ideal vision of carbon sequestration in a community. And essentially the goal of integrating carbon sequestration in urban planning is to create a regenerative community where people are more socially interactive and they live with nature, and where sustainability touches all major aspects of progress.
So how Kayla was talking about this, ideal city, we want to actually make parts of that, or maybe the whole of it, reality. And so we need to make sure that, oh, wait, it's also, we're going to tell you that our code word is vegetation. So here you go, you can write that down. It's kind of in the corner there. Okay, so code word vegetation. Okay, we'll move on. So it's important to implement these carbon sequestering practices and land cover types with the help of municipal governments, so that they can have plans to make the city greener and, turn that vision of ours into a reality. Well, it's not our vision, but the picture that we had up. And so it's important to also have care in selecting your land cover type. So like I talked about, using native plants rather than invasive species is really important to promote a healthy ecosystem. And it's also important to protect the vegetation that's already in place in cities. So as well as other biological forms of carbon sequestration, like bodies of water, grasslands, and wetlands. So it's important to protect those and not, pave them over or build buildings on top of them, stuff like that. And so we also want to vote for politicians with carbon capturing plans for their city. So there are a lot of government officials with clear and transparent plans. And so we want to make that the standard for all government officials and politicians. We want that to, we want them to have those clear plans of how they're going to implement carbon capturing practices into their city. So here are our sources, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you for coming to our talk and listening.
Great job, Erica and Kayla. Thank you so much. I really appreciated getting to learn from you. I personally definitely learned a lot about carbon capturing. I thought that was really interesting and something that I think a lot of us really need to think about more in the future, as we really contend with climate change. One of the things that just got released actually like last week was a report by the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And what they issued, it was their starkest warning today is that climate change is happening. And if we do not act now, then we're going to have irreversible consequences from that. It's going to, catastrophically change our way of life. It's going to increase, weather events, and they're going to be more intense, and just lots of disruptions to all kinds of things with our future. The thing about the report, though, it was also very hopeful in the fact that we can do something about this. We have the technology, we have the knowledge. We know what to do. So what's really lacking right now is the action, is the political will, the corporate will to act, and also the individual will to care about this, to make sure that we are pressuring our politicians, letting them know that this is what we want to see happen, is a much more sustainable future. So with that a big part of that is why what we're saying with our climate change talks is to get together, we can save ourselves. Because we can do this if we work together, if we bridge our barriers, if we bridge our gaps, we can definitely have an amazing future for ourselves. And we know how to do it. And Kayla and Erica just laid out some ways for us to do that. So with that, I do want to ask Erica and Kayla a question. This idea of, together we can save ourselves. What does that mean to you?
I think it definitely starts with the individual, just like educating yourself and figuring out what you're passionate about so that it doesn't feel, sometimes like learning about climate change can definitely feel very stressful, and like, I've gotten discouraged learning about it, but I think if you find something that you're passionate about, then it becomes a lot easier and it becomes, motivational. And so together we can save ourselves, I think, is not, so it starts with, individual action, but also coming together with like-minded people. And also just like showing how environmental benefits are also social benefits and are also economic benefits. So it all is intertwined, and like, we just need to recognize that and see that like a greener future like is the only way to go, and that will save ourselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah, great answer, Erica. I think what you said, a greener future is the only way to go. I think that's really what sums it up. It's the way we have to move. Kayla, did you want to add on to that question?
Another thing is to also be open to a lot of interests. And since like there's like for like environment, there's a lot you can actually do. You can like garden or build like I don't know, like hydroponics with like friends. Like there's a lot of options you can do. And the thing that I would recommend, or like I'm still trying to do too, is like be open to a lot more interest within like environment issues and climate change, because that's how you're gonna like find your passion in like this specific area. And I don't know, it could someday like turn out to be like how you change the world or something.
Definitely. Yeah, great. Thank you for those answers, ladies. Definitely fills me with hope. I think that's one thing we can never lose sight of, is having that hope. And with that in mind, what is something that does give you hope for the future? Thinking about kind of climate change.
I think like everything, like there's a lot of stuff that, takes away hope, but I think it's so interesting that like in every single like sector, or in every single like career, I guess you could go into, there's always like a green way to do it, which is super interesting to me. Like it's not just environmental careers that are going to be the ones to, create this greener future. It's like careers in like tech and in economics and everything, in business, everything like that. There's just every way like to be sustainable, I guess. And so I think if enough people care, then it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be definitely possible.
Definitely. Kayla?
Something that gives me hope is seeing a lot of people be interested in these issues and climate change and environmental issues, and seeing a lot of like youth like create organizations and start movements, and that kind of inspiration gives me hope, because that's how people are going to be more aware of these issues.
Definitely. Thank you for that. Hey, Eric, would you mind stopping your screen share real quick?
Yeah.
Thank you. And then the other question that I wanted to ask, this is actually from one of our audience members. Did you do any research on universities in the United States that are doing well at carbon capturing or are leaders in campus sustainability?
Yeah, so I had the one study from Penn State. So they have a lot of like land cover types that they're studying how that's sequestering carbon. But also I think Texas A&M is doing research, right? And I think like, you've mentioned it, I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, I think a lot of different, I don't know exactly, but those are just some of them. And I'm sure there's a lot more universities. I don't know, Kayla, if you know anything more about that.
I know.
Yeah. Sorry, Kayla, go ahead.
Oh, no, it's okay. I'm not really sure with this like with like campus sustainability, but I know that a lot of like architecture firms are starting to do like LEED certified and building with like environmental standards. Yeah. And a lot of like LEED buildings are like, there are some LEED buildings on campus. And I guess more people are starting to build with or want to build with LEED standards. And I guess, yeah.
So I don't have a ton of knowledge about carbon capturing like on campus. I think it's something that we're kind of still working on as a university, getting to that next kind of level. I'm sure there's some research happening on campus. I don't know, all the research that's occurring. I will say that A&M, we have done a really good job in terms of our overall sustainability efforts. We're definitely one of the top sustainability universities in the country here. And I do think that, carbon capturing is the next kind of frontier that we can really look into. So with that in mind, that'll be kind of my last question is just, Erica and Kayla, what could A&M do in terms of carbon capturing on campus? Do you have any ideas?
Well, I think that, okay, so I know there's a lot of problems with like turf grass, and that being like the sole method of carbon capturing, even though it does capture a lot of carbon in the US, but that's just because of like so much area is covered in turf grass, even though it's not necessarily like effective like per like square foot or so. It's not as effective as different like urban forest, for example, or just like more trees on campus. And so, I mean, I'm involved in research that looks at more like agricultural carbon capturing. So we do have like the Texas A&M farms, which are like about like 20 minutes away, and we work on, how carbon can be sequestered and, less soil erosion in that sense. But on campus, I think definitely just diversifying the type of land cover. So maybe less turf grass and more trees or bushes or something like that.
Yeah, like what Erica said, I think more native plants, because definitely using plants that are non-native to the area is not as beneficial as native plants. And like prairie grass or like wildflowers, I think that would be really beneficial to helping increase like carbon sequestration on campus, and maybe even adding like native plants to roofs or walls on buildings. And that will also like help the cause with like heating and cooling.
Awesome, great. Thank you so much, ladies. I love your ideas. I think as sustainable as our university is, there's always more we can do. There's always more all of us can do. So it's great to see those ideas. Hopefully we can have some opportunities for the future. And I just wanted to say a couple other things here. So a couple of people made some good points here. That someone said this is something that affects us all. So all sectors are going to have to contribute to the solution. So thank you for that comment. And then someone else said that Erica made a great point about connecting work environments to a greener future. She noticed that COVID definitely showed us that working from home, it can lead to a greener future. So that's another comment that somebody made. And then everyone else is just kind of saying thank you, and they learned a lot today and just kind of praising you. So again, thank you all so much. Sorry, we're a couple minutes over, but thank you all so much for your time. We definitely hope to see you at our next talk. And let me just quickly share my screen so you can see when that is. So our next talk is going to be, right here, this Thursday, actually on April 14th, we're going to be talking about keeping climate change in the classroom. So that's something, we learned about carbon capturing. We know that climate change is one of the biggest problems that we have facing our world today. Not a lot of people are really talking about it. The report that came out last week really should be headlines everywhere, and it was barely a blip on the radar. So why are we not talking about that? One of the reasons is that we don't maybe talk about it enough in the classroom, and we know that there's some political stuff happening while we're trying to remove some of those conversations from the classroom, and we know that's really damaging for us having a sustainable future. So join us on the 14th at 2 p.m. for our next talk, and I hope you all have a great day. And Erica and Kayla, thank you so much, ladies. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.